The black car comes to a smooth stop at the gate. They slide silently aside to let him pass, and just as quietly close behind the car, Leon steps out onto the driveway. The house stands quiet and impenetrable, as always. Not a single extraneous light, not a single extraneous sound. He breathes in the cool evening air. It's simply the end of the workday. The inside smells clean and lightly of dinner. He hangs his coat in the closet. Camilla appears from the living room. She smiles her usual gentle smile. "Just in time," she says. "Everything is ready." He nods and follows her into the dining room. A simple dinner is on the table. Steamed fish with vegetables and rice. Everything is to his liking. Everything is as usual. They sit down opposite each other. The clink of cutlery and the soft clinking of porcelain china. "How's your day?" asks Camilla, as she does every evening. "The usual," answers Leon, as he always does. "Nothing new. And you?" "Everything's fine. I went to the store, read." The conversation flows slowly and calmly. They discuss the weather, a possible weekend trip out of town, a new painting Camilla wants to hang in the hallway. Everything is mundane. Everything is calm. But today, something's off. Leon breaks off a piece of fish and suddenly notices something. He looks at his wife. She says the right words, nods in the right places, but her gaze is slightly unfocused. It's staring somewhere over his shoulder, out the window, into the void. When she reaches for the salt, her movements are a little slower than usual. Her laughter at his insignificant joke comes half a second too late and cuts off too quickly. He doesn't ask. He just watches. She pushes the vegetables around her plate, barely eating. Sometimes her eyes suddenly become attentive, as if she's listening to something. But the house is silent. Absolutely silent. They finish dinner. Camilla gets up to clear the plates. "I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed early today," she says, and her voice is even, but there's no warmth in it. "Okay," Leon says. "Good night." He's left alone in the dining room. The silence seems thicker now that she's gone. His fingers tap slowly against the polished surface of the table. This detachment, it doesn't feel like normal fatigue. There's a certain tension to it. He tries to remember when it started. A couple of days ago, maybe 3? Meanwhile, another thought was swirling around in his head. A working one. A small but annoying problem. A loss. Not cargo, but a batch of specialized electronic components. They were inexpensive but essential, and they'd vanished from the warehouse without a trace. Coincidence? Perhaps. But his business is built on not believing coincidences. They believe in facts and control. And now this strange behavior from Camilla. She doesn't look scared. She looks preoccupied with something of her own. What if these two facts are connected? No, that's absurd. She has nothing to do with his affairs. But what if her anxiety is a reaction to something external? To some threat that she noticed and he didn't? He goes up to his office on the ground floor. The room is ascetic. A large desk, a chair, several monitors on the wall. He sits down and turns on the system. Camera feeds flash on the screens. They look out onto the gate, the backyard, all the driveways. Perfect security. He hadn't planned on doing this today, but now there was a reason. 2 reasons. The first was to check the perimeter for any discrepancies from the last few days, perhaps find a lead on the disappearance. The second, to reassure himself that this quiet anxiety that had now settled within him was unfounded, that his home, his fortress, was still completely isolated from the outside world. He opens the archive of recordings, selects a date, 3 days ago, the very day when, as it now seems to him, Camilla began to behave differently. He presses play. Familiar scenes begin to move across the screen. Camilla's car leaving in the morning, returning in the afternoon. His car. A courier with a package. Nothing else. No strangers. No suspicious events. Leon leans back in his chair. So it's not an external threat. Or not just that. He switches to the next day. The scene is the same, calm and orderly. He scrolls through the recordings faster, his eyes darting across the screens, searching for the slightest anomaly. Nothing. Just the ordinary life of their secure home. He's about to shut down the system. Everything's fine. The missing items in the warehouse need to be looked for elsewhere. And Camilla, maybe she just didn't get enough sleep, or she's in a bad mood. It happens. His hand is already reaching for the light switch when his gaze glides over the program's interface. Among the many icons, there's one. Internal perimeter, 2nd floor. He rarely checks these cameras. Why? They're the only ones there. Him and Camilla. But today, something makes him stop. A feeling that the picture is incomplete. What if the cause of her condition is inside the house? Absurd. Utterly absurd. But his finger is already moving across the touchpad. The cursor hovers over the icon. He clicks. He clicks. The exterior scenes instantly fade. The main screen now shows a long, empty second-floor corridor. The nightlights highlight the expensive carpet and bedroom doors. All the doors are closed. The frame is completely silent. Exactly what he expected to see. Leon quickly scans the camera's archive for this evening. He catches a glimpse of Camilla heading into the bedroom. Nothing else. No movement. He feels a slight annoyance. He was needlessly distracted. Now it's definitely time for bed. He reaches for the system's power button again. His gaze automatically glides over the other small preview windows. One of them shows the view from the guest room, a room that hasn't been used for months. The camera is there purely formally for complete control. It's dark in this small window. Of course, he's about to click the cross, but his hand hesitates for a millisecond. Something's wrong with this darkness. It's not absolute. A faint light from a street lamp spills into the room from the window, and in this meager illumination, his finger, just about to close the program, moves on its own and clicks on that small dark window. The image of the guest room fills the entire central screen. At first, he sees only familiar outlines: a large bed, a nightstand, the silhouette of a chair by the window. Everything is shrouded in a grayish haze of semi-darkness. He peers closer. And then his brain, trained to notice the slightest discrepancies, registers an anomaly. There's more than just a shadow on the pillow. There's a shape there, an outline. He squints, leaning closer to the monitor. This isn't a pillow. It's a head. Dark hair is scattered across the white pillowcase. Leon freezes. His breath catches somewhere in his chest. His eyes are wide open, unblinking. On the bed, under a neatly made blanket, lies a man. Small. Very small. A child's silhouette. Slowly, as if against his will, his hand reaches for the brightness control. He turns it, brightening the picture. The image on the screen becomes sharper, losing its blurriness. Now he sees everything. He sees it perfectly clearly. A girl sleeps on the bed. She looks about 8 or 9 years old. Her face is peaceful, her cheek pressed against her palm. Her dark hair is tousled. She is covered with a blanket up to her shoulders. On the nightstand nearby stands a glass of water and a children's book with a bright cover. A roaring begins to grow in Leon's ears. He hears his own heartbeat, heavy and loud, like a hammer striking an anvil somewhere in his temples. A cold wave, sharp and instantaneous, rolls from the top of his head to his toes, freezing his body. This is impossible. His mind races for an explanation. Hallucination, fatigue, a system glitch. Is the camera showing a recording? He pokes at the date and time in the corner of the screen. Today, 11:47 p.m. This is live, right now, in his house, in his room, in a room that should be locked. A strange child sleeps. The thought of a ghost, fleeting and irrational, flashes through his mind and fades. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He believes in things he can touch, things that pose a threat. And this is something out of a nightmare. In reality, he doesn't realize he's rising from his chair. The chair slides back with a dull thud and hits the wall. Leon stands in the middle of the office, staring at the screen. The girl stirs in her sleep, sighs, and turns over, burying her nose in the pillow. A completely real, living movement. This is not a dream. This is not a mistake. Someone is in his house. Someone is a stranger. And that someone is a child. Panic, sharp and primal, grips his throat. All his rules, all his safety, all his control, it all turned out to be an illusion. Directly above his head, 20 paces from where he stands, an intruder sleeps. And Camilla? Where is Camilla? Is she in danger? The instinct for self-preservation, drowning out all other thoughts, forces him to move. He must see with his own eyes. He must understand. He almost flies out of the office. The door swings open with force and slams against the stop. Leon pays no attention. His legs carry him across the hall to the stairs. His mind is in chaos. All the training, all the caution, has evaporated. All that remains is the naked, animalistic horror of a boundary violation. He runs up the stairs, trying to muffle his footsteps, but his breathing is ragged, heavy, and loud. The soft carpet absorbs the sound, but cannot conceal the vibration of his footsteps. The second-floor corridor is plunged into deep shadow. Only a dim nightlight near their bedroom illuminates the narrow path. He turns, heading for that very door to the guest room. His hand is already reaching forward, his fingers clenched into a fist, ready to either knock or kick the door down. His heart is pounding so hard it makes it hard to breathe. And then, out of the darkness, right from the deep shadows by the wall, another figure emerges. It appears silently, like a ghost, and stands right in front of him, in his path. Leon's whole body shudders, and he instinctively jumps back, shielding himself with his hand. A blind defensiveness flashes in his eyes for a second. "Leon?" It's a quiet, frightened whisper, Camilla's voice. He lowers his hand. His eyes gradually adjust to the darkness. He sees her. She stands barefoot, in her light silk robe. Her hair is disheveled, her face pale, even in the dim light. In her wide-open eyes, there is not sleep, but genuine anxiety. She heard him running. She came out to find out what happened. They stand facing each other in a quiet hallway. 3 steps separate them, and a thick, heavy silence, broken only by his ragged breathing. Camilla looks at him. She sees his face. She sees it distorted by an expression unfamiliar to her, panicked, almost wild fear. She sees his dilated pupils, his sweat-drenched forehead, his arms helplessly at his sides, which are usually so confident. She sees his gaze darting feverishly from her to the guest room door and back. Her eyes, too, flit to the ill-fated door, then return to his face. A lightning-fast guess flashes in them, followed by a cold, sinking realization. She doesn't ask what happened. She doesn't ask why he's here. She sees the answer, the whole answer. Written on his shocked face, clearer than any words. The secret is revealed. Her lips part slightly, but no sound comes out. She takes a tiny, almost imperceptible step back, as if struck. Her hand reaches for her throat, clutching the collar of her robe. In her posture, in this gesture, there is not denial, but acceptance, complete and unconditional. They are silent. He tries to catch his breath, to give his brain some kind of command, to ask, to shout, something. She's the first to break the silence. Her voice is quiet, subdued, but there's no hesitation in it, only guilt, and a readiness to accept the consequences. You saw. It's not a question. It's a statement. 2 words that crush the last vestiges of his hopes for a mistake, for a hallucination. He didn't see. He saw. And she knows what he saw. She knows what's there, behind that door. All his anger, all his fury at the betrayal of his safety, all his fear, it all finally finds its outlet. He looks at her, and in his gaze, beyond the shock, a harsh, chilling question now lights up, a question she now has no choice but to answer. Camilla slowly, very slowly lowers her hand from the collar of his robe. Her eyes are still fixed on his face, reading the storm there. She sees more than just fear. She sees nascent anger, cold bewilderment, a dull distrust. All of it swirls in his dark gaze. She suddenly realizes that words won't solve anything now. They can only do harm. There is only one way. She takes a step forward, not toward him, but past him toward the door. Then she stops and turns. Her movement is quiet but determined. She extends her hand toward him, palm open, an invitation, or a request for a truce. "Come on," she says, just as quietly but more firmly. "You'll see for yourself." Leon looks at her outstretched hand, then at her face. The rebellion within him demands immediate answers. A cry, action, but something in her calm, albeit guilt-ridden anticipation, stops him. He doesn't take her hand, but he steps forward, nodding toward the door. A silent agreement to follow. Camilla lowers her hand. She approaches the guest room door. He notices that it's unlocked, just closed. She reaches for the handle, closes her eyes for a second, takes a deep breath, and presses it silently. The door slides inward. She's the first to enter the dimly lit room. Leon pauses at the threshold. His gaze is drawn to the bed, like iron to a magnet. There she is. In real life, not on a screen. The girl, the very same one. She's asleep, her breathing even and calm. The same things are on the nightstand nearby. A book, a glass. A simple dress is neatly hung over the back of a chair. Small worn shoes stand on the floor. Camilla approaches the bed and adjusts the blanket, which the girl has slightly thrown off. Her movements are maternal, familiar. She doesn't look at Leon. She looks at the sleeping Kiara, and her face finally softens, filling with both warmth and pain. Quietly, into the sleeve of her jacket. "I sat her in the passenger seat so we could talk. She was shaking all over. The room is quiet. The only sounds are Kiara's breathing and the distant hum of the city at night outside the window. She got lost. She says she was walking with her mom in a big park on the other side of town. She got distracted by the dog, ran after a butterfly. She looked around. Her mom was gone. She searched for a long time, screaming. Then she left the park and wandered aimlessly for several hours. She doesn't remember the address. She only knows her mom's name, Sharon, and the approximate name of the neighborhood where they live. But the neighborhood is big. Camilla finally looks up at Leon. There's a plea for understanding in her eyes. What was I supposed to do, Leon? Call the police? Take her to the station? You know what happens to lost children from disadvantaged areas. They'll be written up, sent to an overcrowded shelter, where they won't even be treated as an individual. And her mother, who's probably already going crazy with fear, might simply not be able to find her. The system fails. You know that better than most. He doesn't answer. His face is a stone mask, but he listens. I couldn't! Camilla's voice breaks. She wipes an unnoticeable tear from her cheek with her palm. I couldn't leave her there alone, in that gray area. I thought I'd bring her here, just for a couple of days, until I figured out how to find her mother safely, help them reunite, without going through all that horrible bureaucratic red tape. I wanted to tell you, but you were so busy with the missing person case. You were on edge, and I was scared of your reaction, scared that you'd immediately order her handed over to the system, and I gave her my word that I'd help. She looks straight at him, and now there's not only guilt in her eyes, but also defiance. Weak, but stubborn. That's why she's here. She lives in this room. She hears every sound in the house. Every step you take on the stairs. Every doorbell. She's afraid. Afraid of everything. Especially strange male voices. She hides under the bed when she hears your car pull up. She doesn't leave the room during the day. Never. Only late at night, when you're already asleep, I take her to the bathroom so she can wash up. We eat here, the two of us. She reads her books, draws. She's very quiet, like a mouse. Leon tears his gaze away from Camilla and looks back at the girl. Now he sees more than just an intruder, not a ghost. He sees details. The oversized, clearly alien sweater she's wearing. The neatly folded clothes on the chair. Speaking of order, and a fear of disorder, her peaceful slumber is here, in the very heart of his fortress, which she, without meaning to, stormed. His anger doesn't subside. It's still there, a hot lump in his chest. Anger at the deception, at the risk, at breaking all the rules. But now something else is mixed in with it. Something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Something like cold curiosity, or the beginning of some kind of calculation. He pushes away from the wall. His movement makes Camilla flinch. He takes a step toward the bed. Just one. He looks at the sleeping woman. Kiara. Up close, she looks even smaller, more fragile. A mole darkens on her cheek. Her eyelashes are long, wet from sleep. And at that moment, as if sensing a heavy gaze on her, Kiara stirs. Her eyelids flutter and open. She wakes up. First, her sleep-clouded gaze falls on Camilla. Trust and relief immediately flare in her eyes. A half-smile touches her lips. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she notices the tall, dark figure of a man standing by her bed. Her entire small body instantly freezes. Her eyes widen to their limits, becoming two huge, dark, fear-filled discs. She doesn't scream, she doesn't move. She just stares at Leona, and in that look, primal, pure terror. Terror of a stranger, of a man, of the master of this place into which she had wormed herself like an unnoticeable stain. She presses herself against Camilla, trying to make herself as small as possible, and doesn't take her frightened gaze off Leon. Her fingers dig into the sleeve of Camilla's robe. Leon looks into those eyes, the eyes of a small animal caught in a trap, and his own panic, his anger, finds an unexpected reflection in that gaze. They collide with something simpler and more powerful, with the fear he himself had caused, without even appearing. He slowly, very slowly, takes a step back, increasing the distance. His crossed arms fall to his sides. He doesn't try to smile. He doesn't try to say, "Don't be afraid." He simply steps back, giving her space. And deep in those frightened, childish eyes, something subtly shifts. The panic doesn't subside, but a spark of bewilderment penetrates it. He didn't attack. He didn't scream. He retreated. Silence reigns in the room again, this time trembling and fragile. Three people, bound by an incredible secret, simply look at each other in the bluish light of the night. Anger comes suddenly, in a hot and heavy wave. It rolls over. Leona barely steps away from the bed and goes back into the hallway, making way for Camilla, who whispers something soothing to the girl. He doesn't hear the words. In his ears, there is only the white noise of rage. He walks down to the living room and stops in the middle of the dark room. His hands clench into fists so tightly that his nails dig into his palms. Risk. That's the first thing that pops into his head. A stupid, unforgivable, colossal risk. In his house, which should be impenetrable, there lives a stranger. A child. They could see him. The neighbors. His people. Anyone. A child who could say anything. Who represents a living, breathing vulnerability. Everything he's built over the years, security, isolation, control, all of it is at stake because of his wife's sentimental outburst. Deception. That's the second thing. Camilla deceived him. She looked him straight in the eye at dinner, talked about the weather, while someone else's child hid upstairs. She broke the cardinal rule. They're always on the same side. Always. And then there was a silent conspiracy behind his back. It took her just a few days to destroy the foundation of their life together. Fear. It hides behind anger, cold and sticky, not for himself, for her, for the fact that this situation could spiral out of control, that someone will find out, that a trail of problems will follow the child, and those problems will knock on his door. He lives in a world where any weakness, any thread sticking out, can become a noose around his neck. He stands, breathing through his nose, trying to pull himself together. Plans are already forming in his head, how to eliminate the threat. Right now, tonight, take the girl to the station. Or, other options, quick and faceless. Camilla will cry, hate him, but the house will be safe again. He feels the cruel, crystalline clarity of this decision. Muffled voices come from above. Then footsteps. He turns around. Camilla comes down the stairs, leading Kiara by the hand. The girl is wearing the same oversized sweater and pajama bottoms. She tries to hide behind Camilla, her eyes lowered to the floor. Leon looks at her, and she, as if sensing his gaze, raises her head. Their eyes meet. He's still full of anger. His posture, his clenched fists, the hard line of his lips, everything screams it. He sees her reading it. He sees her small face freeze again. But this time it's not sleepy, frightened bewilderment. She's awake. She sees a large, angry, unfamiliar man in the darkness before her. And there's not a drop of hope for kindness in her eyes. Only anticipation of a blow. Silent, submissive, bottomless. She's not even crying. She just watches, frozen, ready to accept whatever's about to happen. That look says, I know I'm out of place here. I know I did wrong. Do what you must. And something in Leon stumbles. His anger, so whole and justified a second ago, meets this absolute defenseless silence. She doesn't snap. She doesn't run. She doesn't beg. She simply awaits punishment. It's the look of a creature already accustomed to bad things. The heat of rage within him doesn't fade, but it's losing focus. Where should he direct it? At this terrified child, cowering at the mere sight of him? It would be like firing a cannon at a paper boat, futile and unworthy. He sees Camilla hug the girl's shoulders, protecting her from him. And this sight, his wife protecting someone else's child from him, completely shatters his inner storm. A heavy, cold aftertaste remains. And fatigue. He unclenches his fists. Slowly, with difficulty. He looks away from Kiara and at Camilla. In the kitchen, he says quietly. His voice sounds hoarse, unfamiliar. We'll discuss it. He doesn't wait, turns around, and heads into the kitchen first. I need to distance myself. Take a break. A minute later, they're all sitting at the large kitchen table. Leon is at the head. Camilla is across from him. Kiara is between them, but closer to Camilla, on the very edge of the chair. 3 mugs of tea, prepared by Camilla, sit on the table. Steam rises, but no one touches the drinks. Awkwardness hangs in the air like a thick blanket. Leon looks at his mug. Camilla looks at him. Kiara looks at her hands, folded in her lap. She sits as straight and still as a soldier on the parade ground. Kiara, Leon finally says. He doesn't deliberately soften his voice. He speaks evenly, but without the previous harshness, simply stating the truth. The girl flinches and looks up at him with frightened eyes, then immediately lowers them. Yes, sir, she breathes almost silently. You don't remember your address. Just the neighborhood and your mother's name. Is that all? She nods without looking. Mom! Sharon's mom. We live on Avenida Sol, in the blue house. Only, I don't remember the number. There are a lot of blue houses there. Her voice trembles. She didn't come back to the park? Didn't call the police? Camilla asks softly, touching her hand. I don't know, Kiara whispers. I waited. Then I went looking. Then it got dark and scary. Leon listens. His brain, already switched from threat to problem mode, begins to work. He's familiar with the area. It's not the safest place. Lost children are not uncommon there. Finding a woman named Sharon with no last name or exact address, possible, but he'll need to bring in resources, and that's another risk. You didn't want to go to the police? He asks, looking at the girl. She shakes her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Mom told me, never talk to the police. Never. They're bad. This is nothing new to Leon. He nods, as if understanding. He really does understand. And this nod makes Kiara look at him for the first time, a little longer, with a hint of bewilderment. You didn't touch anything here? He glances at the refrigerator and the cabinets. Didn't go near the windows? No, sir, she answers quickly. Only in the room and in the bathroom. I'm very quiet. I promise. The promise sounds so sincere and so pitiful that Leon feels the last sharp fragments of anger wash away. All that remains is a huge, unpleasant responsibility and the need to act. He pushes his untouched mug away and rests his hands on the table. Okay, he says, and the word sounds like a sentence, but also like the beginning of something new. Tomorrow. We'll start looking for your mother. He says we, without expecting it. The word we hangs in the air. Both Kiara and Camilla look at Leon with distrust. Kiara because she's afraid to believe him, Camilla because she knows him too well and expects a trick. The awkward pause stretches. Leon himself senses the strangeness of this we. He clears his throat, looking away. But to do that, we need to understand what happened, he says, his tone more businesslike, addressing the girl. You said you got lost in the park, and before that, was everything normal? Did Mom just take you for a walk? Kiara looks down at her mug. Her fingers fiddle with the hem of her sweater. She shakes her head slowly. No, she breathes out so quietly that Leon has to lean forward. We didn't go out that day. She falls silent, struggling with herself. Camilla places her hand on her back, gently stroking it. It's okay, honey. Speak up. We want to help. We'd been staying with Aunt Marie for 3 days already, Kiara begins, hesitating. Mom said that we needed to get away for a while. But Aunt Marie's apartment is small, and her husband was angry that we were there. Mom had an argument with him that night, and in the morning, she said we needed to urgently go and resolve an important matter. A very important one. She promised to be back by evening. She put on her best dress. I stayed with Aunt Marie. Kiara swallows the lump in her throat. But she didn't come that evening. Aunt Marie was worried. She called, but Mom's phone was turned off. Then Aunt Marie said she had problems too and couldn't keep me any longer. That Mom had probably taken care of everything and was waiting for me in the park by the fountain. She gave me money for the bus and sent me there. I sat by the fountain all day, but Mom didn't come. Then I got scared and went looking and got lost. She falls silent, and 2 large tears roll down her cheeks. She quickly wipes them away with her fist, as if ashamed. She didn't leave me, she whispers with sudden, furious conviction. She wouldn't have. Something happened to her, or she can't come. A heavy silence falls over the room. The story takes on new, disturbing dimensions. This isn't just a lost child. This is a child who was discarded, sent to the park in the hopes that her mother would show up, but her mother vanished first. Leon and Camilla exchange glances. They understand the same thing. Kiara's mother wasn't looking for her daughter. She either couldn't or didn't want to. Either way, the situation is 1,000 times more serious than it seemed. Leon leans back in his chair. He looks not at the crying girl, but into the space ahead, assessing. He's no longer faced with an abstract security problem. He's faced with a concrete human tragedy, with the bitterness of betrayal and the fear of the unknown. His original plan, to quickly and coldly hand the child over to the system, now seems not just cruel, but foolish. She'll be lost in the system forever, and her mother, if she's alive and in trouble, will never find her. He feels Camilla's gaze on him. It's pleading and weary, and Kiara's gaze, full of hopeless longing. Suddenly, to his own surprise, he feels not irritation, but heaviness, a burden that someone has to bear. And now that he knows, that burden falls on him. He takes a deep breath and looks at Kiara again. His face doesn't soften, but it loses its stony sternness. Okay, he says again, and his voice is final. The decision has been made. We'll figure it out. I'll help you find your mother. We'll figure out what happened. Kiara freezes, unable to believe her ears. She looks at Camilla, as if seeking confirmation. Camilla, her eyes full of tears, nods quickly, squeezing her shoulder. But, Leon continues, his tone taking on a steely edge. Now he sounds like someone giving orders. To do this and keep things safe, you have to follow the rules. Strict rules. Understood? Kiara immediately straightened up in her chair, nodding with a serious, almost adult expression. Yes, sir. First, you stay in that room always. The door will now lock. You have a key to the inside lock. You can lock it from the inside, but I will lock it from the outside too. Not always, but when I need to leave, or when people come to the house, this is for your own safety. Good. Second, no leaving without Camilla's company. Never. Even to the bathroom at night. Only with her. Not a single step alone in the hallway. Good. Third, no going near the windows. Not for a second. The curtains are always drawn. You do not peek out. Do not come closer. Do not even look towards the window. Understood? She nods even more energetically. Fourth, absolute silence when I'm home or when there is anyone in the house except Camilla. No music, no loud laughter, no running. You are a shadow. You have no idea how to do this? I can be quiet, she whispers. Fifth, if something emergency happens, you hear unfamiliar voices, screams, anything, you'll have a phone under your bed. One number on speed dial, only for real emergencies. No random calls. I get it. He lists the rules clearly, without emotion, like instructions. With each point, Kiara doesn't become frightened, but seems to calm down. Clear boundaries, clear prohibitions. This is what creates the illusion of control in the chaos of her life. She even stops crying. Leon falls silent, studying her. You will need this for the search. For the first time, something other than fear and resignation appears on her face. A spark of purpose. I will draw well. I can. And lastly, Leon gets up from the table. His figure again seems enormous in the light of the kitchen chandelier. Now you eat with us. At this table, at the appointed time. No more secret dinners in the room. This rule takes everyone by surprise. Camila looks at him in amazement. Kiara simply opens her mouth. But it's not safe, Camila timidly objects. Rules provide safety, Leon retorts dryly. And isolation leads to mistakes. She should know the house, know our sounds, and we should know that she eats and isn't sick. It's logical. He doesn't add that this is also the easiest way to accustom her to their presence and alleviate some of the panic that arises with every chance encounter. And that a hungry, withdrawn child is an additional problem. He looks at Kiara. Is everything clear? Yes, sir. She nods, and in her eyes, still wet with tears, there's now not only fear, but also a hint of respect. She's been given a task. She's been assigned a field. They're speaking to her as an ally, albeit a junior one, and very limited in her actions. Then go to bed, Leon says, glancing up. The morning will be early. Camila quickly gets up to see Kiara off. Leon remains standing at the table, looking at 3 full but cold mugs of tea. He hears their footsteps fade on the stairs. He is alone in the kitchen. The silence surrounds him again, but it is different now. There is no longer room for anger. There is room for the hard, concrete work he has just taken upon himself. Unexpectedly, voluntarily, and without compensation. He shakes his head, surprised at himself. Then he decisively pours the cold tea into the sink and puts the mug in the dishwasher. There must be order in everything, even in chaos. The new regime took effect at dawn. Leon, as usual, left early. Camila, after seeing him off, went up to Kiara's room with breakfast. On the tray, next to a plate of omelet, lay an apple. Not just any apple, but the very one Leon usually took with him in the car. It always sat in a vase on the kitchen table. Today, it was missing. Camila didn't pay any attention to it. It was a coincidence. She brought Kiara paper and pencils. The girl, serious and focused, spent the entire morning drawing a portrait of her mother. She traced every line with painstaking care, frequently erasing and starting over. Leon returned that evening. Dinner passed in almost complete silence. Kiara, sitting between them, nodded off into her plate, exhausted from the tension and concentration. Leon ate without looking at her, lost in his thoughts. After dinner, he nodded briefly and retired to his study. The next morning, Camilla was setting breakfast in the kitchen again. She reached for a banana for Kiara and noticed that the ripest, yellowest one was missing from the bunch. She remembered it had been there the night before. She shrugged and put another one down. Later, when she brought the tray into the room, she saw that same ripe banana. It was lying next to Kiara's plate, as if by accident. Kiara was already awake and looking at the fruit with slight bewilderment. I didn't ask, she said quietly. That's good, Camilla smiled. Eat and enjoy. That afternoon, when Kiara was sleeping, Camilla went down to the office to get a forgotten book. On the edge of Leon's huge desk, next to the computer, she saw a small, brightly colored chocolate bar wrapper, the very same kind Kiara liked. Camilla froze. Leon hated sweets. He never had anything like that in his office. That evening, the story repeated itself. The next day, again. The pair would disappear. A handful of berries would appear. A small bar of chocolate would appear on Kiara's tray. No one said a word. Leon didn't look at the girl, didn't ask if she liked it. He simply made these small, almost invisible adjustments to the household routine, as if correcting a glitch in the system by a method of targeted, covert delivery of resources. Meanwhile, in his office, Leon was doing what he did best. He was giving orders. He summoned Mark. Mark was his opposite. Short, quiet, with the face of someone you forget within seconds of meeting. He was Leon's eyes and ears, in places where the boss himself couldn't appear. Leon placed a drawing of Kiara on the table in front of him, a careful, slightly awkward portrait of a smiling woman with kind eyes. Her name is Sharon. She lives somewhere around Avenida Sol. Blue house, but the number is unknown. She has a 9-year-old daughter, Kiara. Sharon disappeared 4 days ago. Before that, she was hiding with a friend named Marie. There were financial problems, possibly debts. We need to find her, quietly, very quietly. Don't make a fuss. Find out where she is, if she's alive, what's going on. There are no photographs, just this drawing and the name. Mark silently took the paper, studied it for a few seconds, and nodded. Money? He asked in one word. Unlimited spending budget. Report to me only. Personally. No notes. Understood. And Mark, Leon held his gaze. This is not a work assignment. It's a personal request. In their world, that meant top priority and absolute secrecy. Mark nodded again, without a hint of surprise, and silently disappeared from the office. The investigation began. Leon felt a certain satisfaction. Action, planning, movement. This was his element. On the evening of the third day, after dinner, Leon headed to the study as usual. As he passed the living room, he heard a quiet whisper. He slowed his pace. Behind the door, Camilla was explaining something to Kiara. He peeked in. They were sitting on the floor at a low table. Between them was a lined cardboard board and a set of pieces, old checkers that had once belonged to Camilla's niece. These are yours. They move like this, Camilla whispered. And these are mine. The goal is to eat all of mine or lock them up. And how do you mean eat? Kiara asked just as quietly, examining the pieces carefully. Like this, jump over your head. Leon stood in the doorway, watching. Kiara was focused. She no longer looked like such a frightened mouse. There was a childish enthusiasm in her pose. Camilla moved a piece. Kiara carefully moved hers. Camilla ate her checker with a smile. Kiara's face lengthened, and then a thought dawned. So we need to think ahead. Exactly, Camilla laughed. Leon suddenly cleared his throat. Both women flinched and turned around. Kiara immediately fell silent, moving away from the board. Go on, Leon said evenly. I'm not interrupting. He entered, walked to his chair by the fireplace, and picked up a newspaper. He wasn't reading. He was watching out of the corner of his eye. Camilla started the game again. Kiara, casting timid glances at him, gradually returned to her checkers. She made a move, then another. And suddenly, unexpectedly for Camilla, she performed a double jump, removing 2 of her checkers from the board. Yes! Kiara exclaimed happily, and then she immediately covered her mouth with her hand, looking at Leon in fear. But Leon simply turned the page of the newspaper without looking up. Not bad, he said neutrally. 10 minutes later, Camilla had to answer the phone. She left the room. The game stopped mid-game. Kiara sat staring at the board, clearly regretting not being able to finish. Leon put down the newspaper. He looked at the board, then at the girl. Your move? He asked. Kiara's eyes widened and she nodded. Go, Leon said. She carefully moved her checker. Leon, without rising from his chair, leaned forward, studied the position, and made his move. He played silently, focused. Kiara, initially constrained, gradually became more at ease. She even corrected him once when he failed to notice an obvious jump. You were supposed to go here, she whispered, pointing. Leon looked, chuckled, and moved his checker to the indicated spot. They finished the game. Kiara won. Dad, he used to teach me. Until he and Mom. She fell silent, cutting off her sentence abruptly. Leon didn't ask. He simply nodded. Tomorrow's the rematch, he said, picking up the newspaper again, signaling the end of the conversation. But the ritual was established. Now, every evening after dinner, Leon spent 20 minutes in the living room. He and Kiara silently rearranged the checkers. No conversation, just the game. And in this silence, in these deliberate moves, something elusive began to change. Fear receded, giving way to a cautious, silent understanding. Leon was solving a new problem, the problem of coexisting under the same roof with a strange but no longer hostile creature through precise, controlled contact. And Kiara, in turn, was learning not to fear the master of the house. She was learning to predict him by the moves on the board. It happened one evening when Leon was working late. Camilla and Kiara, left alone, allowed themselves to relax a little. They didn't play checkers. Instead, Camilla took an old box of children's construction sets from the top shelf in the pantry. She'd once thought it might come in handy for guests with children, but she'd never opened it. They spread a blanket in the middle of the living room and scattered colorful plastic pieces onto it. Kiara, seeing the construction set, froze for a second, and then her face lit up with such pure delight that Camilla felt a pang in her heart. Simple things. They began building. At first, silently, focus. Then Camilla tried to construct a tower, and it collapsed with a crash. Kiara snorted. Camilla looked at her and smiled too. The second attempt was no better. Kiara was already giggling, covering her mouth with her hand. "Here, try it yourself, engineer," Camilla said, with exaggerated offense, pushing the parts towards her. Kiara picked up the pieces, her slender fingers moving with more confidence. She was calculating, trying them on, and fastening them together. A few minutes later, a whimsical skyscraper, crooked but stable, had emerged from the blanket. "See, the base needs to be wider," Kiara explained seriously, as if she were giving a lecture. "Oh, wise man," Camilla laughed. And then Kiara couldn't take it anymore. At first, it was a restrained chuckle, escaping through pursed lips. Then, seeing Camilla making a funny face, trying to imitate her serious expression, she laughed for real. A ringing, carefree, childish laugh. The sound, a clear, high, booming laugh, filled the quiet living room, hitting the high ceilings and bouncing off the walls. At the height of this laughter, the click of the front door opening was heard. The laughter died instantly, like a severed string. Kiara froze, her eyes wide with horror. She instinctively cringed, backing away from the construction set as if caught red-handed. Camilla quickly looked up. Leon stood in the doorway. He had just entered, removing his gloves. He froze in place, listening. The echo of laughter still hung in the air, palpable, like dust in a beam of light. He had never heard that sound in his house. Never. It was as alien as hearing birdsong in a sterile operating room. His gaze slid over the frightened Kiara, by the scattered construction set, by Camilla, who was trying to pull herself together. He said nothing. He simply nodded, walked into the office, and closed the door behind him. The usual. But that evening, he did not show up for the game of checkers. Mark entered the office 2 days later. He entered so quietly that Leon only noticed him when he was already standing in front of the desk. Mark's expression was blank, except for his usual neutrality. "Well?" Leon asked, putting his pen down. "Found it," Mark said briefly. "Sharon Lewis. Lived at 42 Avenida Sol, apartment 5. Blue building. Matches." Leon felt a strange sense of relief, so the girl hadn't been lying. "And where is she now?" "At St. Mary's Hospital. Intensive care unit." Leon slowly leaned back in his chair. "What's wrong with her?" "Officially, a fall down the stairs. Multiple fractures, a concussion, internal bleeding. The doctors fought for her life for 3 days. She's stable now, but unconscious." "Officially?" Leon caught the nuance. Mark nodded almost imperceptibly. "The neighbors say people came to her more than once, demanding money, shouting. On the night of her fall, someone was in her apartment again. Noise, a fight, then silence. And in the morning, the postman found her on the landing between the floors. Creditors, Leon stated. The story was mundane and dirty. Yes, she owed a large sum to a local group. She borrowed the money for her mother's treatment. Her mother died a year ago. There was nowhere else to borrow. The interest rates were mounting. These people, do they know about the girl? I'm not sure. The neighbors say Sharon tried to keep it a secret that she had a child. She sent her to a friend's place on the days when she was expecting guests, but they could have found out. Now they're looking for her. They're looking for both Sharon and, possibly, the child. They need any leverage they can get. Leon was silent, digesting the information. The picture was clear and bleak. The mother was in a coma. The bandits were actively searching. The girl was a bargaining chip or a way to exert pressure. Does she have other relatives? No. Kiara's father disappeared a long time ago. Her grandmother died. That same friend of Marie's, with whom they were hiding, picked up the phone after the incident with the park and went to live with relatives in another city. She's afraid. All that was left was complete orphanhood and the system, or bandits. Mark put a small transparent bag on the table. Inside was an old battered phone. These are her things from the apartment. They found it nearby. I took it while the police were taking inventory. It contains her last messages, for a friend, requests to look after Kiara, and a voice note for her daughter. The last one. Leon looked at the phone, but didn't reach for it. Is the hospital guarded? No. The police have registered the incident as an accident, but strange characters sometimes approach the room and ask questions. They're not letting anyone in yet. Get it guarded. Find someone. Discreetly. Have them report who approaches. Understood. And keep digging. Who are these creditors? Specific names. The amount owed. Mark nodded and disappeared as silently as he had appeared. Leon was left alone. He stood up and walked to the window. Behind the glass was his world. Orderly, controlled. Sharon Lewis' problem was part of another world. Dirty, chaotic, emotional. The world from which he had once escaped, and over which he now towered. Intervene? That means letting this chaos into your life. Declare war. A small but persistent group of thugs, wasting resources, time, nerves, putting Camilla at risk, and Kiara herself. For what? For a woman he didn't know? For a sentimental debt to someone else's child? Logic screamed, no! The most sensible course of action would be to anonymously transfer money to the hospital for Sharon's treatment. And the girl could be quietly and safely placed in a good private orphanage far away from here, away from creditors. Make a donation. Provide her with an education. It would be pure, effective, and compassionate in its own way. He would fulfill his unspoken promise. He would care, but at a distance, without personal involvement. He imagined telling Camilla this, her disappointed eyes, and then he imagined telling Kiara this, or rather, he wouldn't tell her. She'd just be gone for dinner one night, and then Camilla, her eyes red, would explain that they'd found Mom, that everything would be fine, but Kiara now needed to live somewhere safe. He heard that very laugh in his memory, ringing, cut off so abruptly, and he saw her face at the checkers board as she made a successful move, focused, intelligent, lively. He thought about the debt. The amount was laughable to him. The problem was on the level of a street brawl. But this brawl had already sent the woman into a coma, and now she was hunting the child who had taught him checkers and whose laughter had accidentally filled his empty house. To intervene would be to acknowledge that this girl, this stranger's child, now has some power over him, that his decision will be dictated not by cold calculation, but by something else, something unreliable. He clenched his fist. Sharon's phone lay in front of him. It contained a recording for her daughter, the last words of a mother who might never be seen again. He didn't listen to her. That would be too much. It would bind him to this story forever. Leon turned away from the window. His gaze fell on the cabinet in the corner of the office, where Camilla had jokingly placed a small vase the other day. It contained several brightly wrapped candies. For guests, she had said. But there was only one guest in the house. He took one candy, wrapped it in the wrapper of another, and put it in his pocket. A stupid, pointless gesture. But he did it. Quiet but insistent, joined the voice of logic. A voice that echoed children's laughter and flashed black and white figures on a wooden board. Several days had passed since that conversation with Mark. Leon was stalling, putting off his decision. Camilla, sensing his tension, didn't ask about anything. Kiara, meanwhile, lived her own life. Lessons with Camilla, quiet games, evening checkers with Leon. But a quiet, expectant melancholy settled in her eyes, especially when she thought no one was looking at her. She began asking Camilla more often to read her books about family reunification, about missing people who are found. She eagerly watched any news on television if they mentioned anything similar. Her questions became more specific. How do the police search for people? If someone's in the hospital, will they ever find them? And so, one evening, after a particularly long and tense game of checkers, which Leon finally won, Kiara didn't immediately pack up her pieces. She sat staring at the board, and then slowly looked up at him. "Leon?" she asked quietly. She rarely called him by his name. Usually it was sir or just silence. He, about to stand, stopped. "Yes? Are you looking for my mother?" There was no hope in her voice. There was only a tired, exhausted question, to which she seemed to already know the terrible answer. Leon froze. All his inner struggle, all his doubts, lined up before that direct, childish gaze. He didn't know how to lie to children. In his world, lies were a tool for equals, for enemies, not for those who look at you with bated breath. Yes, he said honestly. We're looking. Her face brightened for a second. And soon? You'll find her soon? He saw how she clung to that soon. He couldn't make empty promises. But he also couldn't tell the truth, that his mother was in a coma and they were hunting her. I'm doing everything I can to make it happen, he answered evasively, but with utmost sincerity. Kiara nodded, considering. She looked at his hands, resting in his lap, large, strong, accustomed to command. Then she looked at his face, which held its familiar sternness, but the corners of his eyes showed weariness at her question. And suddenly, she did something she'd never done before. She stood quickly, walked around the checkers table, and before he or she could even comprehend it, she hugged him. Tenderly, like a child, her head resting on his shoulder for just a second, her slender arms barely closed around his torso. Thank you, she whispered into his jacket. I believe you. And just as quickly she let go, took 2 steps back, blushing to the roots of her hair from her own boldness, and ran out of the living room without even collecting her checkers. Leon remained seated. He didn't move. He felt the ghostly warmth of her cheek on his shoulder, through the fabric of his jacket. He saw her frightened but trusting eyes before him, and this simple, awkward, sincere gesture, a hug, pierced his entire armor. All his logic, all his reasonable arguments about the risks and costs, crumbled to dust before that thank you, and that I believe you. He thought about the system, about shelters, about anonymous transfers, and she believed him, personally. She embraced him, as one embraces someone from whom a miracle is expected. And he realized he couldn't help but perform this miracle. He couldn't buy her off with money and distance, because then this, I believe, would turn into yet another bitter disappointment in her life. And his cold, orderly world, in which there was no room for childish laughter and spontaneous hugs, suddenly seemed empty and meaningless. The next morning, Leon called Mark. His face was as inscrutable as ever, but his eyes blazed with the same determination with which he closed the most important deals. The situation has changed, he said without preamble. We're not just assessing the situation, we're solving the problem. Completely. Mark waited silently. I need to meet with these people, the ones I owe you. Sharon, today. On neutral territory. Make a deal. They may not want to talk, Mark said neutrally. They will, Leon said with such flat certainty that there were no more questions. The amount owed, all accrued interest, penny for penny, and names. All the names from the first to the last link. Who came to her that night? Who beat her? Understood. Should I tell him you want to buy out the debt? No. Tell him I want to talk about business. About the bad business that's disturbing my peace of mind. Mark nodded. That was enough. Leon didn't see any noble impulse in this. He saw pure pragmatism. The threat had been identified. The creditors. The threat affected his assets, the peace of his home, Camilla's peace of mind, and as he realized with surprise, now the child himself. The threat had to be eliminated, in the most effective way possible. The violent option would create noise and new problems, so the only option was financial. Buy it out and close it. It was the boss's decision, cold-blooded and final. The meeting was scheduled for the evening in a semi-abandoned garage on the outskirts, which Mark had rented for the day. Leon arrived alone, in a different car, not his own. He was wearing a simple dark suit, with no signs of status. There were 3 of them, 2 young men with insolent, empty eyes, and one older, with a bulldog face and a cheap chain around his neck. The leader of the local gang. They looked at Leon with haughty curiosity. They didn't recognize him. He looked like an accountant or a lawyer. So you're the one who wants to talk about Sharon's business? The bulldog began, lighting a cigarette. It's simple. She owes. A lot. She won't pay. Learned her lesson. Now we want to find her girl. For a family talk. Leon stood straight, his hands in his coat pockets. The amount? He asked, ignoring everything else. Bulldog named a figure. It was several times greater than the actual debt, even with the exorbitant interest. Leon didn't even smile. I'll give you half of what I named, but this will be a full and final receipt for the closure of Sharon Lewis's debt to you and your organization, with all the signatures. And the names of those who visited her apartment on the night of the 4th. Silence fell over the garage. Then one of the young men snorted. Why would we sign anything? Maybe we'll just take everything from you and then find the girl? Leon slowly turned his gaze to him. Not angry, not threatening, simply assessing, as if he were some kind of nuisance. "No," he said quietly, "you won't take it. And you won't find it. Because if you refuse my offer, by tomorrow morning, you won't have a place to set foot, or anyone who will buy a pack of cigarettes from you. Your business will turn to dust, and you along with it." He spoke quietly, without pomp, as if he were talking about the weather, and that made his words ring with absolute authenticity. The bulldog stared at him, and his eyes flashed first with disbelief, then irritation, and then a flicker of understanding. He didn't see an accountant. He saw a man looking down at him from a cliff he would never conquer. "Who are you?" the bulldog asked hoarsely, putting out his cigarette. "The one who offers you the only chance to get out of this situation with the money, not in a trash bag," Leon replied. "Your decision?" He pulled an envelope containing a wad of bills from his inside pocket. "Not the full amount, just a deposit. The rest would be due upon signing the papers Mark had already prepared." Bulldog looked at the envelope, at his silent accomplices, at Leon's calm face. He was a bandit, but not an idiot. He sensed the difference in caliber. "Names, that's a lot," he muttered. "The price already includes my silence about the names," Leon said. "You won't need them anymore anyway. After today, you will no longer engage in such activities in this city. That's the condition." It was an ultimatum, but backed by money and invisible, yet tangible force. Bulldog sighed heavily and nodded. "Give me the papers." 20 minutes later, it was all over. The signatures were affixed, the money counted. Leon took the receipt, carefully checking every letter, the document erasing Sharon Lewis's debt, and the list of names. He looked at the bulldog. "Remember, no one, ever, approaches Sharon Lewis and her daughter, not even to ask for directions. Is that clear?" "Clearer!" The bulldog nodded grimly, clutching the envelope in his hand. He already understood that he had bought not only money, but also his life, and it was a good deal. Leon turned and walked out of the garage without looking back. The problem was solved. Eliminated, crossed off his to-do list. He got into the car and placed the receipt on the passenger seat. Just a scrap of paper, but behind it lay the child's peaceful sleep and his mother's chance for a future. Now he could move on to the next step. They stood in a dimly lit hospital room. The air smelled of antiseptic and silence. Sharon lay on the bed, pale, entangled in tubes and wires. She had only regained consciousness 2 days ago. She was weak and spoke with difficulty, but when she saw Kiara, her eyes filled with such a flood of love, longing and shame that Camilla had to turn away. Kiara approached the bed slowly, as if afraid to scare her. She didn't throw herself at her mother's neck. She simply took her mother's hand, very carefully, and pressed her cheek against it. "Mom," she whispered, and that one word said it all. Leon stood by the door, watching. He'd arranged for a private room, the best doctors, a 24-hour nurse who was truly his person and ensured his safety. The debt was paid, the threat was eliminated, the deed was done. Sharon looked at him over her daughter's head. Her gaze was full of silent questions and animal fear. Who was he? Why did he help? What did he want? "You have nothing to thank me for," Leon said quietly but clearly, answering the unspoken. "Your daughter behaved with dignity. It wasn't difficult for me." He didn't go into detail. He only said that Kiara had come to them by chance and they had helped find her. Everything else, the debts, the hospital, was dismissed as formalities already resolved. It was time to go. Kiara let go of her mother's hand, but didn't move away. She turned and looked first at Camilla, then at Leon. Her face was a warring mixture of joy at being back with her mother and sadness at having to leave her temporary, but now so important, refuge. Camilla couldn't help herself. She crouched down, hugged Kiara tightly, kissed the top of her head, and whispered something in her ear. Tears glistened in both their eyes. Then Kiara approached Leon. She stood before him again, as small as the first night, but without the fear in her eyes. "Thank you," she said again, looking him straight in the face. He nodded, silently. Then his hand sank into his pocket and pulled out a small, flat object wrapped in dark paper. "So you don't forget the basics," he said dryly, handing her the box. Kiara unfolded it. They were checkers, beautiful, wooden ones, in an expensive case, not the plastic ones that were in the living room. "There's a rule here," he added. "Practice. Next time I'll beat you in no time." A smile twitched on her lips. She nodded, clutching the box tightly in her hands. "Goodbye, Leon." "Goodbye, Kiara." He turned and left the room, giving them the opportunity to say goodbye to Camilla alone. His work here was done. That evening, Leon returned home. The house greeted him with perfect, echoing silence. Not a rustle upstairs. No suppressed laughter behind the living room door. No excitement. He walked into the kitchen. Camilla was cooking dinner. She smiled at him, but it was sad and distant. 3 apples lay on the table. She noticed his gaze, picked one up, and put it in the fridge. Unnecessary. They dined alone. The noise of the utensils seemed unnaturally loud. They tried to talk about something else, but the conversation kept faltering, falling into the void left by the third, silent participant in their meal. After dinner, Leon, out of habit, headed to the living room. He sat in his chair. The checkers board was still on the low table, the pieces arranged as they had left them in the last, unfinished game. It was his move. He stared at the board for a long moment, but didn't touch a single piece. He stood up and went to his study. Camilla walked through the house, as if searching for something. She peered into the guest room. It was tidy, the bed made, all traces of Kiara's presence carefully erased. Only a bright hair tie lay forgotten on the windowsill. Camilla picked it up, clutched it in her hand, and walked out, closing the door. The silence became a physical sensation. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy and uncomfortable, like overly loose clothing. The house had returned to its original, immaculate state. And this state suddenly felt unnatural and empty to both of them. Leon wasn't working in his office. He was looking out the window at the darkening garden. He thought that the danger had been eliminated, the problem solved, order restored. Everything was logical, everything was right. But for some reason, this brought no satisfaction, only a strange, unfamiliar emptiness. The first Saturday began as usual. Leon woke up early and checked his chores. Camilla was busy with housework, but by midday, the first disruption to the daily rhythm appeared. Leon, instead of burying himself in the papers, left the office. "Get ready," he said to Camilla. "We're leaving in half an hour." She looked at him questioningly. "Let's check on our charges," he said a little awkwardly. "We need to make sure everything is all right, that the doctor is being monitored, that nurse isn't slacking off." Camilla understood. A smile, the first truly gentle one in days, touched her lips. "Yes, of course. We need to check." They arrived at a small but clean apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Mark rented it under Sharon's name. Hospital insurance and city compensation, arranged by Leon, covered the first few months in treatment. Sharon, still pale and frail, but on her feet, opened the door. Kiara stood behind her, trying to look composed. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. The visit was short and businesslike. Leon talked with Sharon about practical matters, documents, rehabilitation, and a remote work opportunity he could recommend. Camilla helped unpack the grocery bags they'd brought. Kiara showed off her notebooks. She was already attending a new school. Before leaving, Leon nodded to Kiara. "Practicing?" She nodded seriously and pulled out the same box with checkers. "Mom's already losing," she said with a slight smile. "A weak opponent doesn't count," Leon retorted. "I'll check your progress in person next week." So it became a new habit. Every Saturday, late in the afternoon, a black car would stop at their house. Leon and Camilla would stop by for a moment. They brought not only groceries, but also books for Kiara and good tea for Sharon. Leon, patiently, like an inspector, listened to the school news and looked at the report card. He didn't praise anything openly, but if the grades were good, he might say, "Acceptable." And once a month, they would stay for dinner. Simple, homey. This wasn't a new family. This was something else. A small island of calm, normal life that Leon, without fully realizing it, had decided to take under his protection, not out of sentimentality, but because it was logical, because this island was now part of his landscape, and he made sure that this landscape was in order. And when they drove back to their quiet mansion, the silence there no longer seemed so oppressive, because it was no longer empty, but filled with anticipation of the next Saturday. And Leon always kept a spare pawn from his expensive checkers set in his pocket, in case Kiara lost one.